All right, everyone, welcome. Today we're going to jump straight into a really key chapter from Oliver O'Donovan's big book, The Desire of the Nations. We're going to see how he argues that Jesus' announcement of the kingdom just completely flips our whole understanding of what political authority is all about. So, let's get into it.
So this is the question we always seem to come back to, right? Was Jesus' kingdom a political project, or was it just a spiritual thing? Well, what we're about to see is that O'Donovan says, hold on, that's completely the wrong question to even ask. It kind of forces us into these little boxes that the gospel itself is trying to blow wide open.
And this quote, this really gets right to the center of it. O'Donovan is saying that what the gospel shouts from the rooftops is the unity of God's rule over everything. No split between political and spiritual. That's the heart. But, he says, when we sit down to think about it, to do theology, we have to deal with its duality. The pericardium, the sac that protects the heart. And it's this tension, this push and pull between the unified witness and the dual reality that we're going to unpack today.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at why that big question is so misleading. Then we'll jump back to the Old Testament, to the experience of exile, because that's the world Jesus stepped into. After that, we'll see how Jesus just turns that whole paradigm on its head, what his kingdom actually looks like in practice, and finally, what all this means for a totally new kind of authority.
Okay, so first things first. O'Donovan is pretty insistent on this. We can't come to the gospel with our own ready-made definitions of political and spiritual and try to make Jesus fit. No, it works the other way around. The gospel's announcement of God's rule is what redefines everything. We have to let the gospel itself show us what real politics is, the place where God is at work in the world.
So to really get what Jesus was doing, we've got to rewind. We have to understand the political and spiritual air that he was breathing. And for O'Donovan, the absolute key to understanding that world is the Babylonian exile.
You know, St. Augustine saw the exile as the perfect picture of the Christian life. And here's why. It was all about this one reality. God's people were living in a foreign land, under the thumb of a foreign king, but they were still God's people, still under God's law. And that creates this incredible tension, this deep sense of living under two different authorities at the exact same time.
O'Donovan helps us see this duality in two ways. You've got the two cities. That's the two different communities, Israel and Babylon, literally sharing the same streets. But even deeper than that, you have the two rules. You've got the very real authority of King Nebuchadnezzar, and you've got the ultimate authority of Yahweh. And that tension, that's what shaped Israel's entire political theology for centuries.
Okay, so all of that sets the stage for the big moment. Jesus steps onto the scene and makes this incredible announcement. The time is fulfilled. And with those words, O'Donovan says, Jesus takes that whole paradigm of dual authority that Israel had lived with for so long, and he completely transforms it. It's a game changer.
Now this is the critical shift. You have to get this. Jesus moves the whole conversation from being about space, two rules in one place, to being about time. It's not about how to balance God's rule and Caesar's rule anymore. No, now it's a clash of two ages. The old, passing era of broken human rule and the brand new, dawning era of God's direct rule, which is breaking into our world right now.
But what does that actually look like? I mean, how did Jesus show people that this new era was here? It wasn't just talk, right? It was something he did, something he enacted. O'Donovan points out three main ways the kingdom showed up in Jesus' actual ministry.
And here they are: power, judgment, and law. First, Jesus unleashes a new kind of power that sets people free. Second, he brings about God's judgment, which turns the community's values upside down. And third, he fulfills the law, making it the very heartbeat of this new community. So let's break each one down.
Let's talk about power. We're so used to thinking of Jesus' healings and exorcisms as just spiritual things, totally separate from politics. O'Donovan says no way. That's a huge mistake. Real political power isn't just about having a bigger army. It's about having the power to overcome whatever is stopping a community from actually being a community, whether that's sickness, demons, or hunger. For Jesus, empowering his own people was way more important than disempowering Rome.
And this example just makes the point so clearly. O'Donovan talks about a place where the government has collapsed. What are the real enemies there? It's not just the warlords. It's disease, it's famine, it's the things that literally stop people from being able to live together. Now for us, thinking about ministry right here in Nigeria, this is a massive challenge. It means that things like addressing healthcare, food security, the basic needs that just drain the life out of a community, that's not a distraction from the gospel. That is a political act. It's a demonstration of God's kingdom making things right.
Okay, next, judgment. And again, this isn't what we expect. In Jesus' ministry, judgment wasn't about smiting enemies. It was about vindicating the poor, lifting up the outcast. It was judgment for them, and it was about recovering people who were pushed to the margins, even the hated tax collectors. They weren't seen as enemies to be crushed, but as lost sheep to be found and brought home. It was a total reordering of society, starting from the bottom up.
And finally, law. You know, when Jesus criticizes the Pharisees, he's not attacking the law itself. What he's attacking is what O'Donovan calls hypocrisy. Not just lying, but living a life that's just a public performance, where what you do on the outside doesn't match who you are on the inside. Jesus taught that the law is truly fulfilled only when it moves from a checklist of actions to the very disposition of your heart. That kind of integrity, that's the foundation for the new kingdom community.
So, what does all this mean for us as we prepare for ministry? All this redefinition of power, of judgment, of law, it leads us to a completely radical new way of thinking about authority. And this is absolutely crucial for us to grasp.
I mean, it doesn't get much more direct than this. Jesus looks at the world's model of authority, and it's all about domination, lording it over people. And he says to his followers, that's not how we're going to do it. Among you, it will be the total opposite. Greatness isn't about being on top, it's about being a servant. Authority is not a position you hold, it's an action you take for the good of others.
O'Donovan puts it perfectly. Authority is refashioned on a pastoral model. Think about it. It's not a static thing. It's a dynamic energy that is always moving toward need, that pours itself out for those who are vulnerable. It's the shepherd who has 100 sheep but leaves the 99 safe ones to go chase after the one that's lost. That is what authority looks like in God's kingdom.
And so this is the question I want to leave with all of us. If this is true, if the authority of Jesus' kingdom isn't about power and domination, but about service, about empowering the weak, about finding the lost, then how must we, the church in Nigeria, live that out today? What does it actually look like in our communities for us to be shepherds and not just another set of rulers?